Hi, it's Corbett Harrison, and today we're talking about literacy strategies in all the content areas. And by literacy strategies, I know there's such a thing as number literacy and literacy in technology and coding, but today we're specifically talking about reading, writing, and speaking skills, traditional literacy skills that can be used in all the content areas to promote students learning and showing their knowledge. What you see here at left is from the Common Core Standards. I know not everyone uses the Common Core Standards in all the states, but I've worked enough with teachers in other states to know that they're similar enough that if I used Common Core, you would find some benefits in what we are talking about. So I'm going to use the Common Core here. These are language arts K through 12. You'll see there's several on reading, there's writing, and there's speaking and listening. And K through 6 teachers figured it out a long time ago that if you have those skills in language, why can't you also teach them when you're giving the students some science text to read about or having them write about something they've learned in math class. And so K through 6 teachers are usually not very hard talking about doing literacy across the curriculum. It's after they get into middle school that teachers start to resist the idea that they have to teach literacy skills. And I started teaching back in 1990s, and if you would suggest to the science teacher that they take 10 minutes to teach a literacy skill before they had them read something difficult, that would not have been met with a lot of positivity from the science teacher. We've come a long way in the 25 plus years that I've been teaching, and we now have in the Common Core Standards, for example, literacy skills for history, social studies, science, and technical subjects. Technical subjects meaning math, music, technology, art. These would certainly be places where they could do some reading, talk about what they've read, perhaps do some writing afterwards. So we've come a long way, is what I like to say as I look back over when I first started a long time ago. Here's just one of the standards. I work with a lot of gifted students, and they love to debate. And I love to have them write down what they're going to debate before they debate. And so here's a whole standard on that, so the debates don't become reckless. They've prepared them ahead of time. Here's another where they expect they're writing more expository, report-driven things. And here's my favorite one. It's the range of writing across the curriculum in all the content areas. They have to write both long things and short things. Students become better at literacy skills through continued practice. And for them to write, lots of times, every time they do that, they get a little bit better at it. It's like practicing for a sport. It's like practicing an instrument. You get better over time. And so the more chances they have to practice, the more literate we're going to send these students out into the world to be. Today I'm going to quickly, in the 15 minutes I have, just talk about some of my favorite reading, writing, speaking standards, but also ones that try to combine all three. And when I talk about them, I want you to go back to what we've talked about in my previous videos and ask yourself, how could I design or introduce or put expectations behind this strategy so that my different learning styles are being invited into the thinking process. And so we'll start with a close read. Common Core Standards are big on giving students more sophisticated text, read harder text, because they'll probably encounter those later in life after we send them out into the world as independent, lifelong learners. Close read is giving them a small piece of text which invites them to reread and question and rethink. They're not as willing to do that with a longer piece, but they really get deep into the reading. And then after discussing it, then there are text-driven questions that are written by the teacher and presented. And again, as we talk about this, I want you to just think about, okay, which learners would appreciate and how could I modify the way I present this activity or have students do it so that I get as many of the learning styles into it as possible. And I'll just show you how I think about this. If I read this description, I think critical analysis. Okay, that's good for my understanding learners. Focusing on significant details or patterns, to me, that's a good mastery and understanding skill. Develop a deep, precise understanding, back to those understanding learners. So right off the bat, we're seeing lots of understanding. Form or something and patterns are things that I think mastery learners focus on. Craft is something that your self-expressives could be invited in to look at. And then meanings, again, back to your understanding. And you may say, where are the interpersonal kids? Well, part of the activity itself is that they talk out their learning in pairs or turn-in talks or in small groups. And that's built right into the description. And then if you focus on those responding to text-dependent questions, you ask yourself, okay, what can I do to build those questions so that all 4 learning styles have a question at least that they would feel comfortable answering, or in a series of questions if they were doing it in small groups. Every type of learner would have an opportunity to say, hey, I think I can help with that question. But very focused looks at small pieces of text, or what close readings are. If you've never done them, investigate. There's lots of good resources online. We did talk in my class about jigsaw and reciprocal teaching. I used to teach The Jungle to my 8th graders, Upton Sinclair's book about 19th century immigration. And in my science teacher's class, she would do jigsaws on the different types of common diseases in 19th century America, which many of them are talked about in the book. So we were working in conjunction there. My cholera experts would then get together with my yellow fever experts, and they would teach each other and challenge each other to do something to prove that they understood what I just taught you about cholera and you just taught me about yellow fever. And as I design those activities, again, I'm very cognizant of, I'm trying to give options for these students so that if you're a self-expressive teacher, you have a self-expressive thing that you could do to teach and to challenge the person listening to you that you are jigsawing with. Those are some reading ones. Let's talk quickly about some writing ones. I use them as exit tickets, but I know a lot of teachers call them enter tickets, and I have used my exit tickets as enter tickets a few days after they write an exit ticket for me at the end of a lesson. They are allowed to exit the lesson by showing me they've at least got 2 really good ideas that they picked up out of the lesson that they're going to remember. A few days later, I might pass them out again so that the students can review what we did, what we learned. Sometimes they get passed their own to review. Sometimes they get passed another student's exit ticket to review, and then they can have a discussion about them before we move on to new content. I've always really loved exit tickets because they're small. They're just 7 minutes at the end of the period for them to reflect, so the teacher has evidence of what they picked up. These 4 strategies, styles of exit tickets that I've created over the years, they don't perfectly fit into the 4 learning styles of Silver and Strong, but they're close and they do move over into others at certain points. I'm going to quickly go over them. One of my exit ticket options is a 5-sentence paragraph. It's called a hamburger paragraph. It's an intro and a conclusion with 3 interesting details about things the students learned or will take away with them from the lesson. And, you know, got to be honest, I don't like hamburger paragraphs. I think they're too formulaic. My mastery kids really like them, so I have them as an option. I had a great social studies teacher on my team, and I loved the fact that she would teach them the hamburger paragraph because that's how she liked to get the writing from her students when they responded to learning. I never had to teach the hamburger paragraph when I was working with that wonderful teacher. I got to teach more sophisticated paragraphing things, and so working together, the students who needed specific help like a hamburger paragraph, they got that specific help, and then I could be teaching more sophisticated examples. So it was nice to work together. That's the whole purpose of literacy across the curriculum. Here's an example of an exit ticket from a science class, and I'm not going to go read it to you. You can pause and look back at that. Here's one I did create that I was proud of, non-linguistic representation. Exit ticket, it combines words with pictures. This is the form. The students write an introductory sentence, just like a hamburger paragraph. They write a summary or conclusion sentence, and then they give you 3 pictures. Here's my teacher example. I always show them. In my pictures, you'll notice I have words in parentheses. Those are words that the students are not allowed to put on theirs, because when you do a non-linguistic representation, and this is why I consider it an interpersonal strategy, you then have to go around and share it and have people try to guess what your 3 pictures represent from the lesson that they've learned. The important book passage, I turned it into the most important passage. What's the most important thing you got out of this? What are a couple other things you got out of this? But then repeat to me, what's the most important thing? And it's inspired by the passages from the important book. I think when you have to decide the most important thing, you're tapping into things that your understanding learners like to think about. And then the final exit ticket option that I eventually teach them are called haiku riddles. And I know I've introduced this in my vocabulary PowerPoint. But you can write a riddle, 575 syllables, so that you're not identifying what it's about, but someone else could guess. I often have my students write about 2 or 3 things in haiku form, in riddle form, that they have learned about today's lesson, so that someone else can guess. These come from If Not for the Cat, this great book, and you have to guess what animal he's talking about. Here are some algebra exit tickets. In haiku form, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. Here's some biologies that use my adaptation where it's 5 words, 7 words, 5 words. But the idea is read this, tell me what we talked about when I wrote this. And so students have that option. And in doing so, I hit lots of vocabulary, lots of learning style preferences. I did talk in my vocabulary PowerPoint earlier about some of my vocabulary strategies, small pieces of writing that get kids to really own words better. I divide my vocabulary strategies into creative techniques and logical techniques. And I showed you personification earlier, where they personify a word. To me, that's a creative technique. So are my Mr. Stick cartoons. They have to illustrate and make a caption for a context in which they could use the word. I do have logical techniques here. Mark found the word monolith, and he had to look in the dictionary or online and find words that were related and explain those relations. They're doing writing here in their own words. And then here's my imp, int, exclam sentences, where they owe me 6 sentences and in 3 different patterns. And within those sentences, they have to use the vocabulary word 3 times. But if you take a close look at what this student has done here, she's followed my patterns. Very logical to give them sentence patterns, but I was trying to teach them about the different styles of sentences here too. My vocabulary rights are, again, I don't break them necessarily into learning styles, but I break them into logical ideas and creative ideas, and students get to choose. Let's go on to speaking skills. Accountable talk is something that's been around for well over a dozen years now. You can find posters like this online easily, where the kids have respectable conversations with each other during class discussions. These hang on the wall. They can be handouts on the student's desk during the discussion, but they're not allowed to participate unless they use some of these stems to help them going. I've seen a lot of accountable talk prompts that now are being divided into categories. Here's one I found that I liked. It's not the mastery and it's not the same categories as those learning styles, but the fact that we're categorizing them is showing some higher level thinking. I do not have time to talk too much about Socratic Seminar, but it's basically taking accountable talk and turning it into something bigger, where the students take over the conversations based on texts that they read. Look up Socratic Seminar if you haven't. It's a powerful thing to see in a class when it's done well. First couple of times, it won't go very well, I will say that. Then once the students have it down, it actually becomes an amazing thing to watch. Now we're talking about strategies where you're using all 3, speaking, writing, and reading. Debates and mock trials. Again, I work with students who love to debate, and these are very popular with my students. You can do one-on-one debates. You do have to give them a format to debate in. It's not just an argument. I used to teach debate, and this is the sort of layout of the debate. You can fix certain times, like 2 minutes for the case to be shared, 1 minute to ask questions, depending on what research they've talked about. My favorite kind of debate actually to teach, though, my students to do is what I call partner debate, and it's where 2 students work together on the same topic. One writes an affirmative case for that topic, one writes a negative case. And so if it's genetically modified food, each person on the team is taking on, let's look at that positively, let's look at that negatively, because it makes it a lot more fun when the debaters don't know what they're going to argue until you flip a coin right ahead of time. They say the best debaters can debate just as well for both sides of an issue, and this is good practice in that. One partner reads the case, the other prepares for the rebuttal when they actually perform the case based on the coin flip, and then the class votes on who defended the case best. This can easily be transferred into the concept of a mock trial, where you put a literary character on trial, or you put a scientist or a great mathematician on trial. Teacher gets to act as judge, students are the jury, or interpersonal kids will love to play witnesses. Debates and mock trials are awesome for this sort of thing. And then finally, current event speeches is one that I love to watch happen. I had a social studies teacher who made them take social studies, and they had to find current events on them. Every 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe once a month, the students would independently have to find a current event, and they would write a 90-second explanation. They would bring in an artifact to help explain, and either to the whole group or in small groups, they would explain their current events to each other. It was great practice in public speaking, and it was great practice in finding relevant information here's social studies outside of my classroom. Here's science outside of my classroom in the real world, what you can think about. And so I'll end today by just reminding you that in the new set of standards and expectations, literacy is expected in all areas, how are you going to bring a little more literacy into your classroom, no matter what it is that you teach? Thank you, and have a great day.